What? This isn't Final Fantasy. Hello, and welcome to Let's Review All The Final Fantasies, a side story. As you saw from that fancy intro that I worked so hard on, this is Phantasy Star, first released for the Sega Master System. No one knows what that thing is, also known as the Mark III. Now, I want to do this side story because I managed to actually find this game, complete in box, at a local video game store. Shout out to Game Force. Check them out if you're in Denver. So, this December, Phantasy Star turns 30 years old. That's a lot of glare, holy cow. And I really wanted to see how it stood up to its competitor. It was released only a year after Final Fantasy on the Nintendo Entertainment System, which of course was wildly popular here in the United States. And probably Canada. Let's just say North America. So Sega responded with Phantasy Star, and I really wanted to see how it held up. And I had recently learned about the Master System and wanted to see what it was all about. So I have an outline open over here right off screen, and I hope you'll bear with me that this review is going to be a little more off the cuff. I'm just going to be going off my outline. I just find that reading the script makes me sound very wooden and robotic. So to start off with in this review, the opening scene is gorgeous. I had never imagined that an 8-bit computer or an 8-bit console could produce the images that this game produces. It's just bizarre. Actually, thinking back on it now, I'm still kind of shocked. Like, I wouldn't have been at all surprised if this game ended up having animated cutscenes. They're not animated, but they're gorgeous storytelling scenes. And when you start the game, you immediately start on a grind for levels. Not my favorite thing, but it kind of sets the tone for the difficulty of the game. There's a really good chance you're gonna wipe out to the first random mobs you encounter, and that's even after getting the better equipment from the town you start off in. Thankfully, that first town has a free place to rest, because otherwise you wouldn't have the money to heal up. But don't go grinding for too long, because I did have a random stupid high-level monster show up and kill me. And I kind of took that as the game saying, hey, you've been doing this long enough, moving along. Phantasy Star is really known for its 3D mazes. And the creators of Phantasy Star saw 3D mazes in Western CRPGs, computer RPGs, and they wanted to replicate that. And from my experience playing with old MS-DOS RPGs, Phantasy Star nailed 3D mazes. They're much more fluid than I remember experiencing on any MS-DOS machine. And again, it's a technical thing that is really impressive. Like, I can't even imagine the Nintendo doing these mazes this fluidly. Now, for these mazes, I do say go online and find maps that other people have made. In my experience, they weren't always correct, but they were good enough to get me where I needed to go. I did try using graph paper to draw my own maps, you know, like, I took a left, 5 squares down, and it was a mess. I would make a terrible cartographer. And so the menu system in this game is really primitive, and that's not unexpected. In the late 80s, early 90s, RPGs really didn't have great menus. You see this in Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy II, even Final Fantasy Legend, which, if you saw my last review, I loved that game a lot. The menu system is extremely primitive. There's no stat change previews, so you don't know what a piece of armor or weapon is going to do until you equip it. There's no descriptions for what items are going to do either. Like, I didn't know that the cola or the hamburger were healing items until I used them, which, I mean, that would have been great to know. Although, let's be fair, if I had a modicum of intelligence, I would have read the manual. This game marks the first time the manual was super useful. Like every other game I've ever played, I ignored the manual. I don't care. They're only useful for collecting purposes. In Phantasy Star, you're gonna need it, or, you know, since we live in the digital age, look that shit up online. Now, one thing I do like in Phantasy Star is if you want to know how much experience you need to gain a level, the game doesn't hide that from you. Even the original Final Fantasy, I know of no way to find that information out. Oh, no, I take that back. That's in the menu. But in Phantasy Star, you go and talk to a priest at a church. It's kind of weird, but it works. And kudos to Sega for not censoring churches, which Nintendo, like, why? No one's going to be offended that there's a church in a video game. Anyway, man, actually, in the 80s, people probably would have. We had that whole satanic panic with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, one of the core things, besides diving into menus in any Japanese RPG, is your combat. Now, it's turn-based combat, like you see up until the PlayStation 3 era, I think. But it's first-person combat, which will remind you a little bit of Final Fantasy Legend. The key difference being these enemies are animated, and they're fantastic animation. I mean, like, there's zombies that their mouths grow real long, like, you know, like pretend my beard is part of my mouth when I open my mouth, just blah. And it's thoroughly disgusting and fantastic. I love the animations, and unfortunately, you're only ever going to have one type of enemy in a battle. But the game, I saw up to, I think, 12 enemies in a single battle, and unfortunately you can't tell everyone what enemy to attack. The game randomly decides who's going to attack which enemy in the, what I termed, enemy stack. Because it's one type of enemy and you just see a list of them, along with the sprite that's beautifully animated. So you can't really be strategic about it, which is unfortunate. That's one of the key reasons you have a turn-based battle system in an RPG, is to encourage the player to think tactically, you know, come up with a strategy, you know, like, okay, so we have these big guys, and, you know, it takes 5 hits, so for the first round, everyone's gonna attack the first one, second round, one person, and then everyone else focuses on the next guy, right? You can't do that here. The game just randomly decides. Now, one of the neat things, it's only explained in the manual, but it is really cool, and a lot, I think, better executed than in Final Fantasy on the NES, is some items have alternative uses in combat. You'll remember in Final Fantasy you had like the white shirt which casts Blink, and the black shirt which casts, I think, Thunder, or Thunder 2. I don't remember which. But in here, like, there's a wand that one of your characters comes equipped with, and if you keep it after you upgrade their wand, and then you use it in battle, it's a free runaway. It's a guaranteed runaway from anybody except for boss. So that was just great. Really helped in the end game. Oh my god. Now, of course, with turn-based combat comes leveling. Like every other game of its kind, you gain experience through combat, as well as money. It's called necessity. But learning magic, you don't buy it. Each character has certain spells that they'll learn at certain levels. Your characters will learn how to dodge once they reach a certain level. It's not a guaranteed thing that they'll dodge, but as they get more experience, more levels, they'll dodge more often. And that's kind of a small thing, but for some reason I didn't expect it. And it was really awesome when it happened the first time. Like, it was one of those like high anxiety, really intense feeling battles where one more hit and my character was going to die, my party was going to wipe, or one more hit and the monster party was going to wipe, and they got to go first in the turn order. And I thought I was screwed. I thought I was going to lose like an hour and a half of progress because I hadn't saved. And then Alice dodged. And I was like, oh, you're done, son! And so she attacked. Battle was over. It felt great. For some reason, I've never had a Final Fantasy experience like that when the enemy misses. Like, it just feels like, oh, got lucky with that dice roll. I was never like, oh, what? You're dead. You're done. It was great. Now, The leveling system in this game is not as open to experimentation as Final Fantasy is. Because Final Fantasy has, you pick the classes of your characters, you have 4 characters, 6 classes, it's always open to experimentation to see what fits your playstyle, or you can challenge yourself. Phantasy Star doesn't do that. Phantasy Star, your characters are always going to level the same way, they're always going to have the same strengths, the same weaknesses. Your party is always going to be the same. But there is one little thing which can change your playstyle a small amount. I mean, very small. There's a character, Odin, who can either use axes for big single hits, or you can equip him with guns. I think there's 3 different guns he can get in this game. And those guns are reduced damage output, but it's 100% hit rate, and it's to all enemies in the stack. So, if you know what's coming up, you're gonna have like a big boss fight with one boss, well, hey, go ahead and switch them out with whatever axe you have. It's really cool. Let's talk about towns. So when you're in town, you probably want to heal your party. Don't go to the church. There's no inn. You go to hospitals, which is very fitting and surprised me for no reason other than I don't remember another game having you heal at hospitals. Right? Like, that's so obvious that why did it take Sega's attempt to fight Nintendo in a losing battle to show me a game that did that? Unfortunately, healing takes a long time because you don't just walk in and say like, hey, everybody needs healed. No. It shows you a menu with every character and you gotta say, okay, this person, and they're like, oh, it's gonna cost X amount. Is that okay? Yes, that's why I walked in here. Okay, go down the list, person number 2. Okay, that's gonna cost this much. Is that okay? Yes! My god, yes, just heal everybody. I really wish the game had that because it feels like a lot of time is wasted healing your party. Like, there was never a time where I was like, nah, you know what? I'd rather hold on to this money and risk this person dying. Never happened. It was never going to happen because you only have a party of 4. You can't really progress well with one person wiped out. It's just not worth it. And with all the technicals out of the way, let's talk about story. So, as with all RPGs, the arguably most important part, next to how the combat plays out, or right alongside, is the story. And Phantasy Star is a sci-fi RPG with heavy fantasy elements. And I found it really cool to see this change up, right? Like, it's not straight fantasy. Like Final Fantasy was for until I think 6, right? Like, until Final Fantasy 6, it was all like, oh, you're fighting dragons and bullshit. There's no technology in the world ever. But Phantasy Star takes place in the Algo star system. It's not just one continent. It's not just one planet. You will go to 3 different planets during your playthrough of Phantasy Star. And it's really cool. But he plays Alice. Her brother is murdered while he's investigating Lassic, the emperor of the Algo star system. And with his dying breath, Alice's brother warns her that Lassic is dooming the Algo star system, and that you need to find Odin so that maybe you can stop him. So you grind and you fetch quest your way to having Odin, Mayu, and Noah join your party. You find Lassic and blah blah blah. I am not going to spoil the story for this game, because for its time, it's actually pretty involved, and okay, I saw it coming because I'd read up on this game before I bought it, but it was still a blast to play through. It was still a blast to see the twists and turns, right? Like, I knew the general outlines of things, but it was still a lot of fun. And if there's anyone out there who wants to go into this game blind with just like a copy of the manual, I think you're going to have a good time with it. But there's a lot that happens during your adventure. You drive spaceships, ice diggers, hovercraft, right? Like, you're always finding environmental hazards that need to be traversed. And, like, that's kind of standard stuff now, but the biggest environmental hazard you had in Final Fantasy was get the boat and the airship and you're done. Right? No, in this, like, can't just fly your spaceship over the next mountain. You gotta, like, it's not what your spaceship is built for. It's built for taking off and landing at spaceports, right? So you need to find other ways to go through this, and each planet has different hurdles. You also get to meet, like, the native inhabitants of these planets, because it's very obvious that the humans, or whatever you are, whatever Alice is, in Phantasy Star, they're not the native inhabitants of even the star system. They came from somewhere else. Each planet has its own native. And the game does a great job of building this star system and its history and its natives in a really fleshed out way, especially for an 8-bit RPG. Like, you know, most stories, most 8-bit RPGs, and even a lot of 16-bit RPGs that I've played, they'll, like, put a little hat on it, like, oh, these are the natives, imagine away. But here, the writers actually have gone through and they've written some of the history out. Right, you find out from some of the natives, like, what happened to them, why they're living on the outskirts of their own planet, right? Why they're not in charge. Now, one thing that I didn't like about this game is that you really need to speak to everybody in this game. Even if you know where you need to go next, it is very likely and very common that that event won't unlock and be completable until you've talked to the right person who tells you it. Right, so that's always one of those things that makes me mad in a game. There's a very linear, prescribed order that you have to go on. I did find the plot to be more involved and complicated than the first Final Fantasy. Comparing it to later Final Fantasies wouldn't be fair, but it is less complex than, say, Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy VI. But it is more complex and interesting than Final Fantasy I. But again, that's not why anybody today plays Final Fantasy I. And on the downside for this story, most of it is played out through fetch quests, making the progression really boring for some part. Like, there's a part where you have to find a special bakery that's at the bottom of a dungeon because that's the kind of cake someone likes and you need to talk to that person. That's so stupid. That is like the worst example of the Japanese RPG fetch quest I've ever encountered. What? Like, most times, like, I need this special metal to make you the armor so you can go through the cave. Alright, that sounds kind of plausible, right? Not, oh, you need to traverse a dangerous dungeon because there's a bakery down there and they're the only ones that make this cake. What the? Here's where we reach my overall thought. It's a nice game, and I think any fan of classic JRPGs should play it. I think they'll probably enjoy it a lot. It's not going to be very engaging on the second playthrough because the progression system is very linear, the story is unbelievably linear. There's really no variation in the path you can take. But it's still a fun ride. And the story does break down to be very trope heavy, but it kind of turns some of these tropes on their ear and into an advantage. Your party leader is female, and that's coming from a game in a time where I think it was, Alice and Samus Aran were like the two notable female leads. Even now, like, we don't have that many great female leads. And you end up building a spaceship, but because your party doesn't have any pilots in it, you have to find a pilot. That's one of those, like, little details that I love. It doesn't really change the way the game plays out, but it makes sense from a narrative point, right? Like, oh, you've got this fucking girl who grew up in the city doing, like, I don't know, housework. You've got this guy who went around fighting monsters. You've got a cat. You've got someone who stayed in a cave for, like, ever learning magic. Why would any of them know how to pilot a spaceship? They don't. Go find a pilot, buddy. And even the tropiest characters feel fleshed out, and they're presented with a high level of care from the writers. It's a little bit endearing. And the final foe in this game, I'm not gonna name names, he's super impressive. I don't have to name names, you can see his name on the footage showing right now. But holy cow, this sprite is amazing. The animation is amazing. And it's a tough fight. It took me 5 or 6 tries to get through it, and I was over leveled for the rest of the area. But showing up here, got my ass whooped hard. It was a nice challenge, and it was fun to watch every time I died. It's just impressive sprite work and great animation. But don't go out and get a Master System copy for a couple reasons. One, this game is around $80, and in my opinion, not worth $80. Two, in order to play an original cartridge, you're going to need either a Model 1, Model 2 Sega Genesis with a cartridge adapter, or to find a Sega Master System, which are very rare in North America. The system didn't do well here. You could always, I guess, try and import a European or South American one. That's not worth your time, because there are better options for playing it than with the original cartridge. This game's been re-released a couple of times. You can get the Phantasy Star Collection on Game Boy Advance, which is around $13, $15 loose right now. You can also unlock it on Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection for PS3 and Xbox 360. And that game is around $10 for a complete box set. I think that's your best bet. It's got excellent emulation of the Master System. You're using modern hardware, modern controller design, and it's going to be 1080p. And you get to keep $70. Anytime I get to keep $70 and I get a better resolution, I'm not going to complain. Hey YouTube, I just wanted to interject real quick here to let you know that I found another place that might work better for you to get Phantasy Star, so check it out. Alright, so I hope you'll excuse me because I don't have my Wii U hooked up to my video capture device right now. It's kind of a pain, but you can get Phantasy Star, the original Master System version, on the Wii's Virtual Console for $5. And if you've got a Wii U, that means it's automatically upscaled to 1080p. And if you just have an original Wii, it'll still show it in 480p, which is pretty nice. So let's do a reset here. Here we are. And it does have sound and everything, it's just muted right now. Sounds exactly like my original. And it looks fantastic. It looks just as good as what I was getting out of the Sonic collection and what I was getting out of the Retron 5 for recording. So this is probably your best bet. It's the cheapest, it's the easiest, and if you just want to play the game, this is wonderful. So, thanks for letting me interrupt. Back to your regularly scheduled program. I'm not adding Phantasy Star to the official ranking of the games that we've reviewed so far on this channel because it's not a Final Fantasy game. It's just a little side story that we've taken today. But I do give it a solid recommendation. Find whatever version suits your taste. If you're a collector like I kind of am, please seek out a box copy of the manual. Get the manual. Oh my god, get the manual. Or, get the Game Boy game. Play it on the go. It wouldn't make a bad mobile game at all because you can save anywhere. So, yeah. Gotta check that out. Or, go with the PS3, Xbox 360 on the Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection. So find whatever copy suits your taste. And really try to enjoy the game that started Sega's arguably second most popular series that I never hear anyone talking about. Not in real life. On the internet, yeah, all the time. Everyone's an expert on the internet, right? If you're interested in watching the rest of the Final Fantasy reviews that I've done for this channel, check the card up here. Yeah, it's going to be over here. Check the card up here for that playlist. Please subscribe and share. Check the description below for what music was used in this review. And if you're a super generous soul, check the description for a Patreon link. Whatever. Over and out. Watch 6.